Hello, husband.
Hello, wife.
This is a little weird, isn't it?
It's strange, but I'm happy to be on your podcast
Well,
and share
thank
with
you.
what we already know with the world.
Right. So I've actually talked about you before. You know, in the Cafecito with the Coach trailer, I talk a little bit about our family, how we're a family of creatives. And for those who don't know, my husband actually just made a huge career transition. And I'm going to let you talk about that here in just a moment. But for as weird as this may feel, we're really letting everyone in on this conversation because there's a lot. This whole podcast is about not feeling like you're the only one. And somebody listening may be on the brink of feeling like they have to make a big decision regarding their career as a musician, regarding their lifestyle choices. I mean, those things, although exciting, are very scary. And you personally have just crossed this huge divide into a career shift as a musician, how that affected your musicianship and how that has affected us now in our family life. Yeah. So take it away, sir. What in the world are we talking about?
So to give a short summary, for 17 and a half years, as you know, and the listeners are discovering, I was in full-time ministry as a music and worship pastor at 2 different churches, most recently for 12 years here in Virginia, where we live, doing music and arts in the church full-time. And as of January of this year, transitioned out of that to run my business for sign making, wood crafting, and engraving full-time. Took the leap.
Yeah, huge leap. So now we're a home of 2 solopreneurs between what I'm doing here with, you know, the podcast and the voice teaching business and even my own artistry, and then what you're doing now. And so apart from just, oh my gosh, you guys are really going to do that, you know, which we've gotten a lot of that. I still remember, you know, somebody hearing what we were going to do, and they're like, well, what are you going to do? Like, because there is such a huge risk involved. But let's go back to your own journey of how you even became a musician in the first place, because that wasn't necessarily the dream, right? I mean, a little bit about your history, your family history, which is our family history, but I think that would be helpful for people to hear.
Well, and it wasn't necessarily my dream that I was going to be like a musician. But music was always part of my life, as you know. Growing up, I always sang. I played the trombone for a little bit. My whole family was very musical. My mom and dad, as you know, that was their career, was music. And so it was always part of my life, but I never really had this dream to make it my career or to be like a star on Broadway or on a stage anywhere. But I've always loved music. It's always been a part of me. What was the other part of your question?
Well, a little backstory, you know, Shawn's parents, my in-laws, are also my college professors. It's actually where we met. But you were constantly surrounded by it, right? Your parents did it for a living. You watched that part of the process. And you also watched your dad not only be like a college music professor, you also saw him in a music ministerial position as well, even though you were young, you know. So I'm not sure if I've even asked you this before. Seeing your dad do that, and then whenever it was you did decide that I am going to choose to do music ministry, did you ever reflect on any of those connecting points or any inspiration from that? Or was it really solely your journey?
I mean, there were definitely things, you know, I had reflected on, and obviously my dad was a huge source of learning and inspiration for me. But he was in music ministry when I was young. Like I was like 1st through 4th grade is what I can remember.
Right.
He was in it before that as well. But then when I got in my 5th grade year of school, that's when he transitioned into the teaching world. So for the largest part of my life, both my mom and my dad taught music in a ministry, you know, realm, but it wasn't in the church necessarily. So yeah, both of them were sources of inspiration and instruction and guidance. for sure, just as a natural part of my upbringing.
Now, when you and I met, we met in college, both as music majors. And when I met you, worship ministry wasn't necessarily on the radar, right? There was another arm of music that you thought you were really going to take off with as a career.
Yeah, so coming out of high school, as you know, and I'll try not to say as you know, because
I do know.
I know you know most of this. The listener doesn't know it all. But coming out of high school, I wanted to go to a Bible college for a couple of years. It just so happened to be that my mom and dad taught at a Bible college. So it made sense for me to go to that same school for a couple of years. And then the goal was to transition out of that and go somewhere else for a degree in some sort of music technology. Like at that time, I was very into like recording and engineering and kind of learning that on my own. And so at that point, I saw that as kind of like where I was headed. But little did I know that paths would change.
I know, I still remember you helping me record a few demos on what was it? I mean, I think we even have it like in my studio closet. If you're watching this on YouTube, I think it's in this closet right here. But yeah, I remember that being a big investment, that's where you were headed. And what do you think changed it for you?
So, well, I got into, school, and I was on the vocal performance path. And as I shared, music was always part of me. And so it wasn't like I didn't like it. And so I really enjoyed my experience in college, decided to stay where we were. Obviously, you weren't the only reason for that, but you were a big part of it since we started dating my sophomore year.
We're spitting the tea here. Yeah.
But it was just organically, is the best word I can think of, the path just changed to where I finished out my degree at that same school, Point University. And my degree was in vocal performance. And I had a minor in biblical studies. But not long after that, there were just ministry opportunities that came, and felt like that's what I needed to Did it stop?
We'll do a pickup, doing a pickup here. Do a pickup about the ministry opportunities.
Yeah, so I decided to finish out my time in college at Point University, and organically there were ministry opportunities that came along. And I had thought a lot about ministry growing up, and there were even some conferences where I reflected a lot about life and really felt passionate about dedicating my life to ministry. Not really knowing exactly how that looked, but I knew that ministry would be a part of my life. And so as I approached my graduation from college and got my degree, there were music ministry opportunities that organically came about. And after praying about it and thinking about it and us talking about it, decided that's where I was going to lean into. And so starting in June of when I was 22, that's when I started working in the church full time as a worship pastor, music minister, creative arts minister, however you want to call it, and did that for the next 17 and a half years until recently.
Right. And besides just music ministry, you're not just a singer. You are, you're a drummer, you're a keyboardist, you have all these other facets of your artistry that you have been able to exercise. I've seen you in action over the last 17 and a half years,
Yes.
And were there any moments that, whether they were in the moment or now that you've reflected, because I'm sure that this season for you has brought on a lot of reflection, a lot of, wow, I can't believe I did that. Can't believe I either put up with this or wow, I realized that I couldn't have done this on my own. Do you have any of those moments that stand out that you reflect on and think, I don't know how I did that, but I did that?
Well, yeah, all the time. And really, yeah, music ministry and music ministry is almost kind of like not the best way to describe it, because especially nowadays, it's not just about music. It's about music and creative arts in a broad sense. And so obviously that became a very focal point in my life as a part of my job. which was very interconnected to our family and our faith and all of that all together. But music was always more than that. You know, as you said, I played the drums and sang growing up. I played in rock bands in high school and college, and that was always a core part of who I was. And so, yeah, going back to your question, there's not really ever a moment that I thought, you know, I didn't need all of my experiences or all the people that surrounded me through that entire journey to do what I was doing. Like, all of that provided experience and friendships and community and learning that I always felt like prepared me for the moments I was in.
All right, so obviously now that you're on this side of your transition, you know, you probably have a lot of clarity. Everything that you just said is said with so much admiration and gratitude, which is exactly, you know, hopefully where people can be when they reflect on a previous journey, right? And see the lessons learned. But for someone listening to this about being in the tension of feeling like there's a shift about to happen, where did that start happening for you? Because this wasn't like an overnight thing, right? This took a couple of years for you to realize, I feel like there's a shift about to happen, a big life transition about to happen. So walk us through that. When did you first start feeling that, and what were you feeling in the moment?
Yeah, so this is actually, I think, probably the most important thing that I believe will resonate with anybody, you know, no matter what form of life that they're in, no matter what they're doing, what they are feeling in their being about what they're called to do or supposed to do. Because I think this part of my journey can connect with people. I hope it does, because I believe it will. So I'm happy to share it. So fast forwarding all the way back to when I started working in ministry, I always felt like it wasn't going to be forever. You know, ministry, when it comes to your job, it's a unique work to do. It is a good work. It's also a hard work. And there are many people that are lifelong ministry workers in a full-time capacity, and they work in multiple ministerial realms of a church, and they retire, and that's great. I never felt like that was me. At the same time, I didn't know what else I would do. And, you know, for a while it didn't matter. You know, I was doing what I was doing. I loved doing it. I felt gifted for it. Yeah, there were highs and lows, but I wasn't always worried about, like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? It wasn't about that until the last few years, really, you know, where I started feeling like maybe it was time for the next chapter of life. And obviously, you know, you and I talked a lot about that, and, you know, cried tears over it and trying to figure out, like, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our family? Trying to unpack that while at the same time trying to do my job well to the best of my ability and be faithful to where I was at. And so, you know, fast forwarding through that, you know, when I started experiencing that in a very real level where it was like, okay, I think we need to address this. That was even after a little while of experiencing it and really just kind of trying to shove it over to the side. Like, no, like, don't worry about that. Just leave it over here.
Such a common experience, right? Because if you've been in something for a long time, it's comfortable. So anything new or outside of that, actually, you do kind of doubt it and question it a little bit.
So where we got to the point, I say we, because it was you and I together, where we got to the point where we realized, okay, this is like a real thing that we need to figure out. Thankfully, we were in an opportunity, or I was in an opportunity through my work where the leadership at our church was very supportive. They were allowing me to talk to them about what I was experiencing, and they provided guidance and support throughout the journey. And as you know, that journey went for a long time. It involved lots of things. And there were times where I felt, okay, no, I'm going to stay and keep doing what I've been doing. And then there were times where I was like, no, I think I need to do something else. And so with all of that, this business of mine it was like a side hustle. It was going, you know, it was a creative outlet. It was something that I felt like I was thriving in, but also I felt like it was something that was giving me life and energy and I was passionate about.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about too. And I think this is important for all artists, no matter what medium, you use, whether it's in performance or visual. I remember that moment when you just started dabbling a little bit with woodworking, right? And you had your grandpa's saw and you were just kind of playing. And I remember that you did that at a time when you were feeling a lot of the thickness of the tension, these first flutterings of, I don't even know if I want to do this, how long I want to do this. And that was, I say phase one, the phase one, oh crap moment, like what are we going to do? Like how are we going to provide for our family? Is he really considering leaving this? Because there's a part of me, of course, being your wife, where I had grown accustomed to this life as well. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that moment when you started dabbling, playing with woodworking. I saw the outlet part of that, how healthy that was for you, that in some ways it provided a healthy escape. And would you say that you felt a little bit of a surge of energy in your performing arts because you gave yourself this visual artistic medium or this outlet?
Certainly. So just like music was always part of my life, creativity was always part of my life. Like I was always into drawing and doing things with my hands. And actually I remember the way my high school was, you basically had to pick one artistic direction. You couldn't do them all. And so I did a little bit of art class, but then I decided I'm going to do music. And so I did singing, and that pretty much from my second semester, 9th grade on, I kind of just put all the other creative aspects of my life over to the side. Not intentionally, it's just kind of how it was. And so, several years ago, I picked that back up. And that's when I started getting into woodworking and doing things with my hands and learning about tools and doing all that sort of thing. And that was a great creative outlet for me that complemented the work I was doing in the music world in the church, because it was completely different. I could just kind of check out of work mode and, just go to the shop and work on a project or something. And so that made me better for myself, which in turn made me better for the job I was doing in the church. For
Most
sure.
definitely. And it's something that even I coach my artists on too, like when you're getting so bogged down, please go do something non-musical, non-related, that can, you feel like you can just unplug from, and you'll come back refreshed, right? So, okay, you've made this rediscovery again of being able to revisit this facet of your creativity that now you feel like it's bringing some balance back, right? How long after that, though, did you feel those inklings, those wrestlings again? Because they didn't necessarily go away, right? Maybe they were dormant for a little bit, but when did you really start feeling the heat of something's got to change, and you to the point that you decided to make a career shift?
So circling back to what I mentioned, when it got to the point where we realized, okay, this is a real thing, we need to deal with it, and I was able to talk to the leadership, at our church, which in a work sense were the leadership of me and my job. I was able to share with them, what I was wrestling with. While that was happening, it had become more than just a hobby. Like it had become more of a side hustle. It kind of went from hobby, creative outlet to, I'll sell some things online, to people were hiring me to work on projects. Like that had been happening for a while. While at the same time, I started feeling these tensions of, I think it may be time for the next chapter. I don't know what that all looks like. And so, for a long time, I was receiving guidance from the leadership at church, helping me through that from that standpoint. While at the same time, personally, I was reflecting and praying and figuring out and talking to you about, what that meant when we still didn't really know what it meant. And so ultimately, we decided, okay, I'm going to stay in what I was doing. And even now, I don't regret it. There was a reason for that. It wasn't the right time. But about a year after that, it all came crawling back. And at that point, we knew, okay, I think I'm supposed to run this business but I'm scared to death to do it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But
Definitely.
it got to the point where I knew if I didn't do it, it would have been for all the wrong reasons. It would have been because I was scared of all the risks involved. So financially speaking, it would have been much easier for me to stay in my job in ministry, but everything else would have been wrong. I knew it was, for a long journey up to that, I was absolutely certain, and am to this day, that it was time for the next chapter of life. And at the same time, the one thing that I had said for so long, I don't know what else I'm going to do, it was like God was saying, well, this is what you're going to do. And it just so happened that it comes with all sorts of risks, you know, going into full-time business ownership and lots of unknowns with that. But I knew if I didn't do it,
right,
it would have been for all the wrong reasons. And so when that all happened, you know, we decided, you know, because you obviously, again, you and I were part of this together, we knew it was time. And so when that time came, you know, we informed the church leadership at that point of what I was going to do. And then collectively we worked together on what the timeline was. And again, this had nothing to do with the church more than it did with me. You know, just like, you know, for somebody else who may not work in the church world.
Exactly.
If they're feeling a tension of, I feel like I'm supposed to do something else, but it's not that my job is bad, it's just me. Like, that's what it was. Like, I love the church, I love the people. I am so thankful for the community that the church is, even now. But it was about me. It was about us. It was about knowing it was time for the next chapter of our lives. And so, yeah, I mean, it was like, okay, let's go.
And I think we had lived with that wrestling for so long, and I personally was going through a lot of mental health, emotional health, spiritual, you know, sojourning of my own, that when you approached me and said, no, I think this is the time to actually do this, you know, this is not me like thinking about it, it's time. I had already come to a place of peace myself to receive that from you and be like, oh yeah, I totally agree. Not that at the end of the day, obviously, because this was going to impact both of us and our family, you know, it's helpful that we were a team doing this, you know, and it wasn't necessarily like me following you or vice versa. But I mean, that was the added benefit of having given each other space to do the wrestling, to do the growing, to do the figuring out, so that when you did say, I really do think it's time, Mel, I knew in my heart of hearts that I was right there with you, and that, yeah, we needed to do whatever it took to get you to where you are today, you know. And so that was back in January of this year. Now, you know, we're into April, and
well, that was January that was like January, February 2022.
That we made a
that
decision. Correct. Yeah. Yes. Thanks for clarifying. But January of this year, where you actually like closed one door and then open, you know, headed into what you're doing now. I do want to mention something, because a lot of times that wrestling to do something different, like, thankfully, you speak very highly, very kindly of your experience with the transition of your former employers. Not everybody has the benefit or blessing of that, you know, and sometimes they can't wait for their current employer, right, to be okay with it when they still need to just cut the tie and go and take that step of faith. And we live right by an airport, so if you hear that, that is the sound of freedom. We live right by Langley Air Force Base, or a few minutes away. So if you heard that jet, that's what that was. So how do you encourage the person that knows they need to do this, you know, in their career as it relates to their artistic careers, but they don't have, like I said, this perk where everybody's rooting for them, you know? What would you say to them?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe kind of the challenge in this setting is like like my story, like the details of my story and our story are specific to us, but in a broader sense, they can touch on everybody.
Right.
So it just so happened that in my work world in the church, you know, I was a part of healthy churches. I worked in healthy churches. You know, there was a level of trust there that I had built up with the church leadership over the years to where I felt like, okay, I can talk about this with them. That may not be the case for everybody. I would guess it's not in the business world for sure. And of course, for a while, you know, they knew where I was. They had journeyed with me through it. You know, it's not like it was a surprise, you know. And so what I would, I guess, correlate, is that the right word? What I would compare that to is the importance of having a trusted group of people that someone can lean into when they're feeling something inside them to help them figure it out. Like whether it's one or two people, you know, it could be a handful of people like it was for me that you can share with that can offer you guidance and perspective. One of the things that the church did for me early on was they heard me. They may not have understood exactly what I was feeling, but they wanted to make sure for me, for you, for our family, that we didn't make any hasty decisions that we would have regretted. And so they offered a lot of wisdom and guidance from a perspective of, you know, try some of these things, try some of these resources, talk to some of these people that can help you unpack the things that you're feeling to see if it's about something else, you know, so you don't make a hasty decision and you regret it. You know, so that was going on early on. And then, you know, when it got to the point where we decided, okay, it's time to resign, and you know, fast forward through that, when that time came, you know, there was a level of trust and support amicably amongst us to decide, okay, I personally didn't want to just walk out the door. I wanted to end well. I knew that wouldn't have been good for the church either, so we made a collective decision to finish out the year. You know, which at that point, you know, that was like another 7 or 8 months, and journey together, you know, so that, you know, there was a lot involved with that, and that may not be the case for other people. It's probably not the case for other people, but the important thing is to have people that you can talk to, that you trust, that can help you come to those decisions. And then whether it is a 2-week notice with your job or whether it's more of a longer journey, kind of like it was for me, at least you have a healthy system for approaching it all. And again, it's probably easier said than done. I know it was really hard for us, but you know, I've always been a fan of do the best you can for where you're at until it's time to do something else. And so that was my mode with where I was at. As much as I was feeling the tension of it all, I wanted to end one thing well and start another thing well. And I wanted it to be a healthy process as much as it could be. And I think it was.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question begs, you know, to be asked, this one aspect of your creativity, your visual artistry with woodworking, the work of your hands, became the outlet to help you do your performing arts job better in music ministry. Well, you left that, and now the thing that became the outlet has now become the main source of income. So how do you still have a desire to still nurture your musicianship, this, you know, musical side of you? And if so, how do you plan on doing that now?
So that I don't really know completely. I would, you know, Right now, I'm approaching 3 months into doing what I'm doing now full time. You know, there's still a lot about life that I'm figuring out, that we're figuring out all together. And this is probably one of those things. You know, what is now my full-time work, what I'm basically throwing all of my life into, is what several years ago was the creative outlet. That wasn't my work. And so now, as much as I love it, you know, and it doesn't feel like work, I know that my whole life can't be defined by just that. And so now I'm in kind of a discovery mode as well. Okay, what are the things that are the outlets? So musically speaking, I'm looking forward to, and I'm excited about musically volunteering as part of the church, doing similar things that I was doing in my job, but in a support role, really doing the same thing that so many people for 17 and a half years did in support of me in my role. I'm looking forward to doing that, whether it's singing or playing the drums or helping with technology or other things that I embrace as giftedness for me that will now be used in a different way. And so like when I've talked to people, and I don't mean for this to all be about like ministry. I know this is not like a ministry podcast, but it's so much about my journey. Like when I talk to people about what I'm doing, how I got here, and what it's all about, the other side of that is being part of the church in a different way. As I'm walking with Jesus in my life and what that looks like in multiple levels, but specifically with the church, embracing my gifts and still using my gifts. I'm not abandoning those things. Those are now going to become the outlet, that complement my business. And there's a lot of that, I'm still unpacking and still trying to figure out what it all looks like, but I still love to sing. I still love music. It's still part of who I am. It's just and it will be in a different way moving forward.
How did you feel that first Sunday like that? We just attended church and it wasn't part of your paycheck and you just sang, with the people in the congregation. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I think it was good. Like there's a level of weirdness that you have to kind of go through because, for the listener, we are still attending the church that I was on staff at for 12 years. And so like we have intentionally stepped back to give ourselves time to reacclimate to another season of life, but also to give the church time to transition as well. But we don't want to abandon the church. And so, we took some time where we weren't going at all. And then there were some times where we were watching online. And then recently we've started attending again. And it's been great, but it probably more for me than anything. I have to just kind of retrain my brain to walk into a building as part of the church. And I'm not walking into what my job was previously. So going into the service and being part of the service and singing and worshiping, it all felt really good. Like it felt like that's what was supposed to be. But it's not without like having to retrain my thinking about that a little bit.
So for the person who won't understand, who isn't versed in church world, because this could be the singer who's so used to singing for academia, maybe they were classically trained, and all of a sudden now they're giving themselves permission to actually sing outside of that. Maybe go to karaoke with friends and sing their favorite pop song. But if they go and see, a friend's senior recital, that might draw up some feelings of something that they walked away from, that they shifted away from. So for the person who may not understand, the church world, what exactly did you have to turn your brain off of, as when you say I had to walk into the room and not be like in the mode where my brain was when it was my job? What does that look like? Did you have to try not to pay attention to all the details in the room? How were you able to simmer that down in your mind?
Yeah, well, I probably haven't figured it out. The way I would describe it would be, if you worked at if you worked at a department store, for a long time, and then you stopped working there, but you still go there to shop. So you walk into that department store, no longer employee, but you may still know a lot of people there, and there's still a lot that you value there, and you want to shop, but you're not thinking of it the same way. There's probably a ton of responsibilities that you had when you worked there that you don't have when you're there purchasing things. Now, obviously, in a church sense, you're not going to purchase and shop, but it's going back to an environment that you knew in the context of one thing.
Exactly.
And now you're going back to that environment in a different context. And so I think in the music world, it could be like what you described. It could be, you know, maybe somebody worked at a theater.
Yeah.
You know, and
absolutely.
Then they stopped working at that theater to do something else for their job, but they still love the theater. They want to be a part of the theater. So when they go back to it, if it's the same place, they have to kind of work out approaching it differently.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it was like, you know, yeah, I'm going and we're going to church. We're part of the church, but I'm not doing like all the, like my job tasks that were part of it, which weren't bad, but now that's for somebody else to do.
Exactly.
And not for me to do. And I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
but,
it does.
It definitely, you know, you're retraining the way you think about something as you're doing it. You know, I feel like what this all kind of boils down to is like leaving one thing in your life doesn't mean that you have to abandon it completely. You know, that thing can still be part of your life, even if it's in a different capacity.
Right. Yeah, because there's all sorts of nuances to the reason somebody feels like they need a shift in their career, a shift in what the kind of art they, you know, decide to pursue. Some of it may be fraught, right, with trauma even, you know, or really, really hard things. You know, and I've been candid on the podcast about even some of my own things that I've wrestled with, but you're right, in a situation like yours, you know, it was just, and you and I have talked a lot about this, that had you stayed any longer, it would have gotten to a point where we would have gotten really bitter. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we talked about that a lot, you know, staying somewhere longer than you need to, because then we would have seen some, you know, hard negative effects on our family, only for the sake of the security of the paycheck, you know, or for whatever reason. And so, you know, I think obviously it's super admirable, you know, what you've done. I'm a fan of yours, you know, and I know that a lot of people have been vocal about how inspiring that's been, which is why I wanted to share this conversation publicly with our Cafecito, with listeners, and no matter where, you know, and what season of life you find yourself in with your performing arts, whether you do get paid for what you love to do, or you're a hobbyist, right? You are volunteering on your church praise band. You are part of the community theater, the community choir. You know, it's really a matter of making sure that you feel like yourself when you're doing it. And wouldn't you say that do you feel like as hard as it is, right, to take this business venture and this risk, how do you feel as an integrated person having now stepped into this role?
Yeah, I feel like I am genuinely like my whole self, because I know that I'm doing what I was supposed to do. So in a church sense, in a ministry sense, it sounds weird, but it's the reality. Like I said, I've always felt like I wanted to be faithful to what I was at when I was there, to do my best until it was time for the next thing, whatever it would be, in any form, not even just with work, just with life. In this sense, the most faithful thing that I could do, that I believe wholeheartedly, was to leave it, to leave the job part of it, to do this other thing that I felt like, okay, I'm supposed to give it a go. And to not do that would have been a disservice to myself. It would have been a disservice to my workplace, to the church, to everyone involved. And so, yeah, I feel great about being genuinely in the middle of what I was supposed to do. Now, most days I have a lot of freak out moments. So as Melissa can attest to, most days I have more freak out than I do probably other things. It's like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But it's not that it's not out of regret. It's just out of the fear of the unknown. It's about
the newness. Like, yeah. Oh
my goodness, like, I got a paycheck every 2 weeks, and now I don't know when money comes. So, and that, I mean, those are the very real, tangible things that are just like, You know, is it going to work or is it not going to work? And I can say honestly now, like, I don't, and we've talked about this, there's no plan B. Like, it was either this was going to work or it's going to fail. And at that time, I'll figure something else out. But it's not like, oh, this is plan A, plan B, plan C. This is plan A.
It is.
And so I was watching a documentary earlier, and you know, one of the quotes in it said, like, if you're going to take a big swing, you got to be ready for big misses. And so this is a big swing in life. And I'm already seeing, you know, where I'm having misses in it as well, but I'm also seeing where I'm having hits with it as well. And so I think just having the mental fortitude to go through it, that's hard, but it's also freeing at the same time.
Yeah.
And that would be, you know, if I were to kind of unpack this for the singer, like, I know as somebody who's sung my whole life, or sang my whole life, there's a lot of feelings that come into before you step on a stage and sing and you put yourself out there. There wasn't one Sunday where I wasn't nervous in some form or fashion, and I had to kind of process that. And so, but I was never going to let fear keep me from doing that. You know, so if you're a singer and you're working through all those feelings of, I want to do this, I feel like I can do this, it's hard, I'm afraid, what do I do? Don't let fear keep you from doing it. Yeah, and there may be times where you're successful and you feel like on a cloud nine and it's a great performance experiment. And there may be times where you feel like, oh, that was terrible. But don't let fear keep you from taking that step, you know? And so that's, you know, and outside of the singing sense, I think that's true for anybody. You know, if where I'm at now, where we're at now, I believe wholeheartedly that there was a lot of stuff that I was feeling, that we were feeling, that it took us a long time to get to the point where we were like, these things are real and we need to give it attention. Like, we need to give these feelings attention.
And they're not going away. They're only getting stronger.
It was for a reason.
Yeah.
So I am confident that there are tons of other people in this world that are having those kind of feelings, whether it's about work or ministry or performance, whatever it may be. If you're having the feelings, give those feelings the attention that they deserve to figure out what's going on, you know, and then don't let fear, because the fear's not going away, you know, just do it scared. You know, and really, and lean into it, you know, as you keep taking those steps toward being your best self, you know, and that's kind of what, you know, I guess that's the best summary is, you know, it was a long journey for us to take the steps to be our best selves, because it's not just about me, it's about us and our family. But personally, I feel like I am taking those steps to be the best version of myself, as messy as it is along the way.
Amen, brother. Well, thank you.
Should we talk more about like singing? I feel like this turned into a little bit more like motivational speaking than it did about singing.
It's
you know?
Okay, because here on Cafecito we have real conversations. It's a lifestyle talk for performing artists. And I always say that your decision to sing, and then not just sing, allow other people to hear you sing is one of the most courageous things you can do. And so everything we've talked about between showing up as yourself, paying attention to the wrestlings inside of you when you feel those shifts, you know, everything you've encouraged us to do to make sure that to check our sources, surround ourselves with people that we trust, that we can share these feelings with as sounding boards, you know, and that you may not have everything ready to go before you make that decision. And that's like a whole nother, you know, episode. We could do part 2 if we wanted to, because we did the best we could to prepare as much as possible for this big switcheroo. And I have no regrets, you know, jumping over the Great Divide with you. And I think you have modeled, you know, for our daughters too, you know, what it means to take these big risks, even if you're nervous doing it, you know, to chase after their dreams as well, you know. So this space that we've created is exactly to encourage people to do that. Your story exists inside of the ministry church world. Maybe yours doesn't, but just know that I hope you listen to this and realize you are not the only one, right? That if you are facing a brave decision right now, maybe this is the sign for you that it's okay to take that leap, you know? So thank you.
I realized I didn't take much sips of my coffee while we were doing this.
I had you talking a lot. Let's do a quick rapid fire.
Okay.
Yeah? Quick rapid fire. Okay. Because
What's rapid fire?
Rapid fire. You don't know what rapid fire is?
Is that where you ask questions and I answer them?
Yes, very quickly.
Okay.
Gut reaction. Favorite band or artist right now? Because are you back to listening to music for pleasure? Without listening to music just for your job?
I listen to mostly like sports talk radio. But my favorite band artist for pleasure right now, I feel so old. I'm not even like really into like who's current. Okay,
you said that you played in a rock band, so who was your favorite band at the time?
Yeah, so back at that time, I was a big fan of like POD, Creed, Foo Fighters.
Telling everybody how old we are, that's okay.
I was a big fan of like alternative, rock type music. But awesome. I don't know for now, like I don't really know a lot of like current music. I like One Republic. I like, Fall Out Boy.
Yes, yeah, you do. You want to go to a concert.
In a different sort of, vibe. I definitely think Adele, has a great, voice.
Awesome.
But yeah, music, I'm not that great at like listening to music right now.
You're rediscovering what it means to do that. What about favorite Netflix, Amazon binge?
All right, so Netflix. I just finished watching the first season of the show The Recruit.
Okay.
And that was really good. There's another season coming. So I'm looking forward to when that, comes out. I also have been watching on Netflix the documentary of the plane that disappeared back in, I think, 2014, which is kind of freaky and interesting all at the same time.
All right, favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookies, not cookies and cream, chocolate chip cookie dough.
I was about to say, wow.
Chocolate chip cookie dough. Yeah.
All right, it's Girl Scout cookie season here in the United States where everybody's buying. What's your favorite Girl Scout cookie flavor?
I like all Girl Scout cookies. I think if I had to pick one, it'd be the tag along, like the peanut butter wafer chocolate cookie. That would be like the one. If I had to just pick one.
Notice how I ask you all these sweet tooth questions because you are a sweet tooth, so I know you.
Yeah.
Husband, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, wife. I love you.
I love you
I'm proud
too.
of you. And your audience should know that you've been a big help and support and inspiration to me on this journey, not only as a spouse, as a wife, as a minister's wife, and kind of the stuff that can come along with that, but also just with like, you're like a boss lady. Like running your business.
My goodness.
We need to do another podcast, and I need to interview you, and you can share about your journey with NBC Performance, because I don't know how many people know it, but I know it, and I'm just so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I did not pay him to say that. All right, bye.